Dave Talks Comics, Episode 65, Justice League Unlimited, Season 2, Episodes 6 through 9. Dave Talks Comics is a program on the subjects of comic books and cartoons. Talk about comic books I have read and cartoons I have watched. I talk from my notes. I don't go panel by panel or scene by scene. I try to do more than just summarize the stories. This program is not spoiler free. I try not to spoil everything, but in the process of talking about these comic books and cartoons, I will probably spoil them in some way. Back to JLU. It's been a little while since I talked about it. I've watched 4 more episodes, which is basically, I guess, the middle third of season 2 of JLU. And the first episode is one that I really love. I actually watched it twice. I watched it first a few weeks ago, and then in preparing for this episode, I watched it again, and I could watch this episode a million times. This is one of my favorites. There's a lot of good ones out there. This isn't the only really great one. That's a lot of fun. But this one is definitely one of my favorites from the whole run. So this one focuses... I think one of the things I like about this story is that it focuses on the street level characters, and by that I'm talking about, I was about to say Green Lantern, but Green Lantern's not in this episode. I'm talking about Huntress, I'm talking about The Question, I'm talking about Green Arrow, and I'm talking about Black Canary, who I guess is the only one of those 4 who has any special powers. Although she's still not, a incredibly powerful person like Superman or Wonder Woman, and I don't think she's considered to be, genius level like somebody like Batman is, as far as planning things out and figuring things out. And maybe The Question is, but maybe he isn't as far as genius level. But anyway, let me get into the episode. So this episode, the driving force behind this episode is really the Huntress. And she is out for blood. She wants revenge on a guy named Mandragora. And she enlists the Question's help to do this. At first she tries it on her own. And she basically wants to kill Mandragora. And what's revealed in this episode is that Mandragora killed her parents. And she actually witnessed this. And so she wants revenge. And she tries it on her own first. That doesn't work. In fact, it gets her booted out of the Justice League. The Martian Manhunter has been keeping tabs on her, and he calls her to the Watchtower and then takes her identity card and tells her she has to leave. And she talks to Question before she leaves, where she picks up her stuff and takes off, and she talks Question into helping her out. She proposes an exchange that she's looking for Mandragora. She's not sure where he is. She thought she knew where he is. Turns out he's been moved by the authorities because he's in witness protection, basically, because he is supposed to be, he's going to give information on testimony to put away certain members of the mob or whatever, former associates of his or maybe not associates of his. And so she needs help finding him. So she turns to the Question. Now, the other group, because after all, this episode is called Double Date. So you have the first couple, which is, and they aren't really completely a couple at this point, although that kind of happens eventually. But you've got Huntress and the Question on the one hand, and then on the other hand, you have Green Arrow and Black Canary. Now, at the beginning of this episode, they are on guard duty. They are supposed to be guarding Mandragora. and in case anybody tries to come and bump him off or maybe rescue him. So there's a confrontation between Black Canary and Green Arrow and the Huntress and the Question. There's a fight between them, and then Mandragora escapes, and they have to go after him. And the interesting thing, I think, in this episode, one of the interesting things is the double crosses that happen. How first the Question makes it look like he's going to do one thing, and he kind of looks like he's pulling the... He kind of gives a clue, but makes it look like he isn't trying to Green Arrow and Black Canary, and to lead them off. But then it turns out that the Green Arrow is smart enough to know that this is too easy, and so it's kind of neat how that works out, you know. And so you've got a little back and forth, and there's a chase that happens where, let me see if I remember this correctly. Yeah, Green Arrow and Black Canary are chasing the Huntress and the Question, and eventually they get their act together and they confront Mandragora at the docks, and it all comes down to the Huntress as to what she wants to do, you know, whether she really wants to kill Mandragora or not. And this is a really good episode, and it's really hit some emotional points, especially, you know, the whole what will the Huntress do when she's given the opportunity to kill him? And there's some other nice touches in this episode. There's a character, in addition to Mandragora, there's another minor character who makes an appearance. His name is King Faraday, who is he's a government agent of some kind. I'm not sure if he's FBI or what he is. He first appeared in comics a long time ago. And actually, I'll go into that in a little bit, but he only has a very brief appearance here. I think he appears also in Season 3, in a couple episodes in Season 3 of JLU. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that this story has some similarities to a comic book story, which is called Batman Huntress Cry for Blood, which was written by Greg Rucka and drawn by Rick Burchett and inked by Terry Beatty. And I didn't know of this. This actually came out a couple years before this episode of JLU came out. And it's not the same story, but it's got some similar points to it. They're both about the Huntress wanting to get revenge on the person who's responsible for killing her parents. That person is Mandragora, and the Question is involved. And that's about it. I mean, Batman is involved in this story. They call it Batman Huntress Cry for Blood. It's really a Huntress story, not a Batman story. And there's also appearances by other members of the Bat family, like Nightwing and Robin and Oracle. And there's other characters like Richard Dragon is in it. Now, none of them, I mean, it's a Huntress story, but they all play a part in it, and it's a very good story. In fact, I want to reread it now after flipping through this in preparation for this episode. So maybe I'll reread this at some point and record an episode about it, because this is, I mean, Greg Rucka is a great writer, and this is a really good story. The art is very nice. This came out, I think, in 2000, and it was a miniseries, a 6-issue miniseries, and I'm not sure how available it is, but I got to imagine you can find it for not too much. I don't think it's in super high demand. Okay, moving on. The second episode that I'm going to talk about is called Clash. This is probably my least favorite of this group. It's not an awful episode. It just doesn't really speak to me as much as the others, I think. This one basically boils down to a fight between Superman and Captain Marvel. And basically what happens is Superman gets duped by Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor makes this big show that he's making these donations, and Superman becomes convinced that there's a bomb hidden or there's something that's going to blow things up. And Captain Marvel is convinced that Lex Luthor is an honorable person and has turned the corner and is no longer a bad guy. And so he does what he can to prevent Superman from destroying what Lex Luthor, this community that Lex Luthor has built, that he's going to give to the people of Metropolis. And Superman is out to locate this thing, which he believes is a bomb or something along those lines. So that's the crux of the episode. So obviously, in addition to Superman and Captain Marvel, you've also got Lex Luthor in here, Lois Lane's in here. There's also an appearance by the Parasite, that villain who can steal other people's... I don't think he steals their powers. Or does he? I can't remember now. I know he's shown up, I think, in Superman, the animated series. And I've certainly seen him in a few comic books. But I'm not sure if he just steals their power, their strength, their energy. Anyhow. And there's also this whole hint of Cadmus, Project Cadmus, in the background of this episode. And Cadmus also kind of played a small role in Double Date because the question was looking for information on Cadmus, and kind of what he bargained with the Huntress was that he'll help her find Mandragora if she'll help him find information on Cadmus. And actually, that doesn't come to... There's nothing that happens in that regard as far as finding information on Cadmus and Double Date until another episode, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So, getting back to Clash, basically Superman gets had by Luthor. And, this whole thing kind of builds up this, it's just another brick in the wall, or just I'm not sure what, a straw in the camel's back or whatever, as far as creating a rift between the government and the superheroes, making Superman look dangerous. There's some references to no, wait a minute. No, I'm sorry. No, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. But it makes Superman look dangerous in the same way that he was made to look dangerous in other episodes. And I'll get into that when I get to, not the next episode, but the one after. So both of the previous two episodes, Double Date and Clash, both dealt with just had ties to the Cadmus storyline. Now this next one doesn't have anything to do with Cadmus, but I still thought it's a great episode. It's a lot of fun. And it's got two names, actually. It was originally supposed to be called Mystery in Space. And if you watch it on Netflix, it will show initially, if you look it up in the menu, it'll be called Mystery in Space. But then when you watch the episode, the title says Hunter's Moon. So I'm calling it Hunter's Moon. And basically, this is a space rescue mission. And you get a weird grouping of people, which is Hawkgirl, Vixen, and Vigilante. And Vigilante is really the weird person here because it's a space mission, and Vigilante is kind of a cowboy, and I don't know. It works, but it's just kind of weird when you look at it at first. So basically, the reason why Hawkgirl is sent on this mission is because there's something to do with transuranic iron ore, which, if I understand it correctly, is unrefined nth metal, which is what Shayera Hall's, Hawkgirl's mace is made out of. And they get this distress call from these people who are on this, it's a moon, somewhere way out in space. And I think part of the reason why I liked this was because it reminded me kind of some of those episodes of the Super Friends from way back when the Super Friends would take off on these space missions. And so I kind of liked it a little bit for that reason. But, okay, so a couple of things I wanted to point out. Actually, let me talk a little bit more about what happens in the episode. And that is, basically, they arrive on this moon only to discover that it's a trap. And that it's a trap set by Thanagarians who want revenge on Shayera for betraying them. Now, this goes back to Star-Crossed, which was the finale to the original, to the second season of Justice League. And it's probably still my favorite story of all of these. I mean, there's some good ones, but it is just such a good, it's a great three-part story. It really helps to watch all of Justice League before you get to that. There's probably a way you could watch just some of the episodes and get it, but there is build-up to that moment. And because basically what it turns out was that Hawkgirl was sent as an advanced scout, and that the Thanagarians want to destroy Earth because it's part of their plan in their war with I can't remember who it's supposed to be a war with. It's not Ran, I don't think. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank as to who the war was with. But anyway, what happens is in Starcross, the Thanagarians were finally repelled from Earth, but of course Shaira was kind of disgraced because of this, because she'd betrayed her team members of the Justice League, and at the same time she betrayed her home planet by not siding with them in their attempts to destroy the Earth. And so what happens in this episode is that some of the Thanagarians who she betrayed, particularly a woman named Parandul and a guy named Krager, want revenge on her for what she did. And they've lured her and also Vixen and Vigilante to this moon and or try to take them out. So that's basically the crux of the episode. It's the Thanagarians want revenge on Shaira, and so Shaira and Vixen and Vigilante are fighting for their lives. Now, the way I look at it, this episode is part of what I call the Hawkgirl redemption arc, and I've never seen it called that anywhere else. But basically, in Starcrossed, up until Starcrossed, in the first 2 seasons of Justice League, and there really were just 2 seasons because then it becomes Justice League Unlimited, JLU. But in the first 2 seasons, there was just 7 heroes for the most part. They would occasionally have a guest star, but it wasn't a huge team like it is in JLU. And they would all pretty much show up in most of the episodes. They wouldn't be in every single one, but they would show up in most of them. So after Starcrossed, Hawkgirl basically stopped showing up for a while. It's several episodes before she finally shows up again. And then there's a few key episodes, of which this is the third one, which kind of are her redemption, bringing her back into the team, into the fold. And the first one was called Wake the Dead, and I believe I talked about that on a previous episode, and I wish I had that up so I could tell you exactly which episode that was. Maybe I will manage to look that up while I am talking. But let's see if I can look that up while I am talking. So the first one's called Wake the Dead, and that was the one with Solomon Grundy. Okay, I talked about Wake the Dead on episode 41 of Dave Talks Comics. I was talking about a number of episodes, and one of them was Wake the Dead, and that was in the first half of the episode. And that was kind of a Defenders-like team of members of the subset of JLU. And then the next one was called The Balance, and that's the one, and I think I talked about that on the previous episode in which I talked about, that would be episode 57, where I talked about the first 5 episodes of JLU. And those were, that's the one where Hawkgirl teams up with Wonder Woman, who's one of the people who still doesn't really accept her apologies for what she did. And so then this is the third one, and this is the one where she actually has to face the Thanagarians. It's the first 2, it's kind of more about making things up to the other members. And of course, then there's the other element in this story which is interesting, which is that one of the people she's teamed up with, Vixen, is now dating the guy she used to date, Green Lantern. So at the beginning of the episode, you get a scene between Vixen and Green Lantern, and then they're talking, and then at the end of the episode, you get a scene where they're kicking back and relaxing after this mission. So I guess spoilers, they survived the mission. But and Vixen and Shaira are comparing notes about Jon Stewart. And so those are, I think I've touched on everything. Oh, well, okay, a couple things here in my notes. You do learn the final fate of Hro Talak, who was, I think, Shayura's fiancé, or they were certainly romantically involved, and he appeared only in Star-Crossed. But you learn about what happened to him, and I did say his final fate, so that should give you some hint, even if not exactly what happened to him. And the other thing that I thought was interesting in this episode is Shayura's costume. It has changed again, and it kind of reminded me of Bruce Lee's outfit in Game of Death. You know, the yellow jumpsuit with the black stripes. It kind of has a similar motif to it. I don't know. That's what I thought of. There's nothing else that I can think of that invokes Game of Death, although honestly I haven't seen it in a long time, so I'm not sure what it would... I can't remember too much about it to make comparisons between that and this episode. Okay, the final episode I'm going to talk about is Question Authority. And this is definitely a very Cadmus-involved episode. The two big heroes that are involved here are Superman and Captain Atom. You also have the return of the Huntress and the Question. And there are references in this episode to Superman the Animated Series, to Legacy, which was the final episode of Superman the Animated Series, and that was the one where Superman got brainwashed, was captured and brainwashed by Darkseid, or specifically by Granny Goodness, and was made to work for Darkseid for a time. And that was a really cool episode. And basically what happens in this one is... and there's also a reference to Justice League A Better World, which was the episode where the Justice League winds up on the world where the Justice Lords live, and the Justice Lords wind up on the world where the Justice League live, and the Justice Lords are like the evil version of the Justice League. They live on a world where they dominate the world. And the thing that you have to know about A Better World is the reason why the Justice Lords weren't always evil. But what happened was the Flash got killed in that world, and this caused Superman to go, well, I don't know if crazy is the right word, but he basically, because of that, he killed Lex Luthor on that world. And then everything kind of, all the dominoes fell from there, I guess you could say. And everything changed because of that. And that's why that world, things wound up that way. Or at least that's the logic that's presented in there. So in this episode, part of what happens is that Huntress and the Question break into LexCorp's, one of LexCorp's buildings, and manage to steal files, which includes somehow, and this seems a little weird to me, but includes somehow video showing the Superman of the Justice Lords killing the Lex Luthor of his own world. I don't know where the video of this would come from. It's supposed to have happened in the Oval Office because at the time it happened, Lex Luthor had become president. I don't know. But anyway, so this kind of drives the Question a little around the bend. He's not sure how to handle it, what to do. And this is where things get maybe a little weird. I don't know. But he reasons that if he kills Lex Luthor, then Superman can't. And because he's afraid that the Flash is going to get killed, and then Superman is going to kill Luthor, and then everything's going to go downhill just like it did on the world of the Justice Lords. Now, I think that he's just been, up a little too late and spending a little too much time with his crackpot theories, because, that's just ridiculous. But anyway, be that as it may, this is what happens. Basically, the Question goes to Lex Luthor's office to confront him, and says he's going to kill him so that Superman can't, so everything doesn't go downhill. Seems a little weird. The other thing I thought that's worth pointing out about this, so basically this whole episode is, it's very Question-centric, as the title implies, Question Authority, although Superman plays an important role in this episode, because what happens is the Question doesn't kill Luthor, although he says he wants to. Instead, he gets captured, and then he gets tortured, which leads me to want to point out a couple things, which is that this is pretty violent stuff. I mean, first off, you have the question saying he's there to kill Luthor. It's not just he's going to take him down. He's there to kill him. And then you've got the torture scenes with the question, where he's basically, it looks like he's getting electrocuted. And it's not like hyper violent, but it's pretty violent for a cartoon, or for what I'm used to seeing as far as this kind of stuff. I mean, it's certainly much more violent than what you would see on Super Friends or a lot of other cartoons. I mean, it's not just, violence isn't just in the action, it's also in the intention and in the, there are ways to be violent without actually touching somebody. And anyway, the other thing that happens in this episode is that General Eiling, who is a recurring character who's shown up before, who's working for the government, i.e. working for Project Cadmus, recruits Captain Atom. Because Captain Atom used to be, I think, in the Air Force, and General Eiling tells him that his commission has been reactivated, or something like that. And he's basically called back into service. And so towards the end of this episode, Superman and Huntress go to try and rescue the Question. They find out about where he's being held. They try to go to rescue him. And they found him, they're taking him out when Captain Atom shows up. And then you have this great cliffhanger ending. And that's as far as I've watched at this point. I've watched the following episodes years ago, but this watch through, that's as far as I've gotten. So basically Captain Atom shows up and says, no, you're not leaving with the Question, he's staying here. And that's where the episode ends. So there's 4 more episodes left in season 2 of JLU, which means also 4 more episodes basically left in the Cadmus storyline. Although, as I recall, the 4th episode is kind of a weird one, so I think it's basically 3 episodes left in the Cadmus story. I'm really enjoying it still. I think it's a lot of fun to watch, and it really holds up well. I could see myself rewatching this in another few years from now. A couple things I wanted to talk about. I mentioned King Faraday before. I did a little bit of research. He first showed up. He was in the episode called Double Date, the first episode I talked about. He first showed up in a comic book called Danger Trail, which he was in issues 1 through 4. The series only ran for 5 issues. This was 1950, 1951, and he was some kind of a government agent, whether he was FBI or CIA or what he was supposed to be, I'm not sure. But those issues, of course, are prohibitively expensive. I have not read them. Some of those stories were reprinted in Showcase issues 50 and 51, which came out in 1964. Those issues aren't quite as expensive, but still, they're not cheap. But it's interesting, because after that, there's only really one more story that he shows up in, which showed up in World's Finest number 64, which came out in 1953. And from what I was able to find online, it looks like that story was originally supposed to appear in Danger Trail number 6. But Danger Trail only ran for 5 issues and was canceled. After that, from 1953, there's basically no appearances other than those reprints in Showcase. There's no appearances by King Faraday until 1978. At which point he shows up in a few stories in Batman, in Flash, in, I think, Teen Titans, and then New Teen Titans, or maybe it's just New Teen Titans. And he has a handful of appearances here and there. He's not used a whole hell of a lot. Now, what I remember him most from is he played an important role, not a crucial role, but he played an important role in DC The New Frontier, the Darwin Cook miniseries, which came out about 10, 11, 12 years ago. I think it was 2003 or so when that came out. Excellent story, excellent read. He has some very interesting conversations with, or interactions with the Martian Manhunter, as I recall. If you haven't read it, it's a great book. You should find it and read it. The movie I wasn't as crazy about. It just did not live up to the to what I thought it should be. Okay, the last thing I wanted to talk about is Mandragora. I looked him up. He has a few appearances in comics, really not that many. He appeared in Huntress, the 1989 Huntress series. I mentioned Batman Huntress Cry for Blood, which came out in 2000. He appeared in that. And he also appeared in Huntress Year One, which was a 2008 miniseries. That's it. That's all. But he's the same person. He's a crime boss who killed or was responsible for the deaths of the Huntress's parents. And although he doesn't look the same in the comic books as he does in this TV show in JLU, as I understand it, he looks like somebody named, I think, Tobias Whale, who was a nemesis of Black Lightning. So I'm not sure what's up with that. Anyhow, okay, so that's it for JLU Season 2, Episodes 6, 7, 8, and 9. Next time I talk about JLU, I hope to be talking about the last 4 episodes in Season 2. And hopefully that will be in the next month or 2. We'll see. But anyway, I'm still really enjoying this. I think it's really worth watching JLU. It probably makes sense to watch Justice League first. I know it's a lot, but the stories are so good, and the way they weave everything together, the way they bring all these different characters in, the Huntress, the Question, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Amanda Waller, General Eiling, Lex Luthor, the way they weave things in from past DC animated series, like Superman the Animated Series, and from the Justice League series. It's just all so good. It's so good and so much worth watching. That's it for episode 65 of Dave Talks Comics. Dave Talks Comics can be found on the web at davetalkscomics.com and facebook.com/DaveTalksComics. On Twitter at DaveTalksComics. Email can be sent to davetalkscomics@gmail.com. If you're looking for more information on comics, then I recommend trying comicbookdb.com or comics.org. For a more complete list of websites I use when preparing to record an episode of Dave Talks Comics, go to davetalkscomics.com and click on the links link near the top of the page. Next time on Dave Talks Comics, I will be talking about Uncanny X-Men issues 148 to 150. I'm Dave. Thank you for listening.
Wildcat says you're a nut job.
Funny, he says the same thing about you.
He's right.
Okay, bored now. Goodbye.
You must be the ugliest guy of all time, Question. Hiding your face like that.
Go away. Don't touch that.
Wow. I had no idea that the Girl Scouts were responsible for the crop circle phenomenon.
Few people do. Few even think to ask the question.